I don't like the Pokemon Weavile, like, at all. It tickles me in all the wrong areas, which is all over my body because I don't like being tickled, but Weavile does that. I just don't like it. I feel like it doesn't make sense as a Pokemon because, like most Pokemons, they are based on, like, creatures in real life, and they either look like them or they have a type based on what they are. For example, Seal is a seal, and seals are... they're essentially water creatures, so they're water type. Or like Goldeen, which is a goldfish, which is a water creature. Or it's something that they do. Like you got Pikachu, which is a mouse, but like why is it an electric type? Because mice, or like rodents in general, they chew on cables. Electric. It chews the cable, it buzz. Electric. Beedrill, bug. You get the thing. Weavile, as a weasel, it doesn't really make sense to my head. Like, ice, sure, maybe because they hide in the snow during the winter time. I don't know. I don't know much about weasels. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the dark type, I can't really get my head around that. No matter how hard I try, I just don't see weasels as dark creatures. Obviously meaning evil, because that's what the dark type is, because in the Japanese games, it's not dark type, it is Aku type, which literally translates to evil, which means Samurai Jack has a very creative name for its villain, essentially being called evil, which makes Samurai Jack very similar to Austin Powers. Anyway, weasels aren't dark creatures. They're not evil creatures. They're cute little fluffy noodles that do no wrong. Maybe they eat insects. Maybe they eat other animals. That's not an evil thing. Is a fox evil for killing a rabbit? In Zootopia, probably. Either way, like it's not an evil thing. It's just like what the animal does. But why is it evil? Why is it dark type? That never really made sense to me. But I just finished reading a book from the series Wheel of Time. That particular book was called A Crossroads of Twilight, which is the 10th book. It is a horrible book. I really do not recommend that book. It's just bad. And one of the most interesting parts of that book, funnily enough, was to do with weevils in the food supply. And my head went, what's a weevil? I've heard of that word before, but usually I'm just like, oh, when someone brings up a word that I don't know, I'm like, yeah, weevils, I know weevils. The Pokemon, Weavile, yeah, the weasel thing. But I decided to finally look it up, and weevils are these little bug things. So far, nothing like Weavile, except, obviously, they sound pretty bloody similar. But there's apparently a shit ton of really weird lore about weevils in general in real life. So there's this book called The Criminal Prosecution and Capital Punishment of Animals by E.P. Evans, published in 1906. Yes, it is a real book, and it is ridiculous. Before we get into weevil lore, I just want to give you a bit of an idea of the type of cases that are covered in this book. And I mean, like, there's over 200 documented cases in this book. So this is things to do with, like, full legal proceedings, evidences, there were witnesses, there were verdicts, and there were even attorneys present that actually defended the animals. One of these cases in 1457, there was a sow, which is a mama pig, and it was convicted of murder, and it was sentenced to hanging, which is just like a really kind of poetic and really sad way of killing a pig, because I'm not sure if you guys have seen the videos of pigs that are looking up at the sky for the first time and they're just like squealing and just like, oh my god, what the hell is that? Because pigs can't look up. But for, I guess, that particular sow, as it was being hung, it probably saw the sky for the first time and then died. The pig did have 6 little piglets. Unfortunately, they were too young. They were at a tender age, and they were thus acquitted from the case. On top of that, there was a trial for rats who were accused of plague carrying, which, spoiler alert, they did. But in order for them to plead their case, they needed to obviously go to court. Unfortunately, and kind of predictably, the rats didn't show up to court because they're animals and they don't understand how, A, the court system works, and B, just how time and calendars and what like an appointment was. So they didn't show up, and obviously this was a big no-no to the court, but luckily they had a defense attorney, and he, or they, or she, I think it was he, of course it was he, it was medieval Europe. Only he's could do anything. Wow, what a time. Anyway, he argued that the rats couldn't make it to the court because there were too many cats around, and thus he asked for a mistrial because it was too dangerous for the rats to go to court. And the court accepted it, and the rats got off scot-free, which is crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. Look it up yet again. I'm not lying. This isn't a book. Obviously, the book may be lying, but that's as far as I researched, okay? I went 1 degree in. 1 degree in. All right, with that little side tangent out of the way, let's get back to the case that was actually relevant to this entire video, which is the Weavils, also found in this book. So in 1587 in Saint Julien, France, the Weavils were accused of destroying the wine economy because of their intrusion into the vineyards without permission, the naughty little things. So they got taken to court. I'm not sure if they actually went to court. These are Weavils. Maybe they put them in a jar. It wasn't actually mentioned in the book. Either way, their attorney argued for 8 months. This was an 8-month-long court case against Weavils. Must have been a hell of a defense to be able to argue on behalf of bugs for 8 months against wine owners. Like, these are the rich of the rich back in those days. I'm still in these days. If you own a vineyard, you're doing well. You're doing well. So they argued for 8 months, and Pierre, the attorney, pulled out of his little sack of goodies a quote from the book of Genesis, which would have done fucking numbers back in the medieval days. They would have been like, whoa! Good book. Good book is good. He quoted, "Every green herb for meat," which essentially meant that these are God-made creatures, and therefore they have God's divinity upon them to be able to have full access to all of God's lands, including God's produce, which includes the vineyards, the grapes, all that sort of stuff. So they were well within their rights. Obviously, the vineyard owners were not happy about this argument, and very difficult to argue against God, especially back in medieval times. But in the end, they assigned property to these Weavils. They got like a good chunk of land, like a whole plot of land where the Weavils could live, and they could eat, and they could breed, and they could shit, and they could do all the Weavil sort of things that Weavils like to do, but they were barred from entering the vineyards that these people owned. Now, obviously, these are bugs. These are Weavils. So they just went to the vineyard anyway. And because they did that, as part of the court order, if they didn't actually stick to what their sentence was, they were excommunicated from the church. And therefore, they were considered no longer divine or part of God's creation, and therefore they were evil. See, the Weavils are evil, and therefore that's why Weavile has a dark type. And you can... confession. So I found out quite a bit of these like little fun facts about Weavils and all these other animals, and I really wanted to make a video on it, just like a little bit of a rant, and I realized that my YouTube channel is pretty Nintendo focused. So I was like, this is not a good video for this platform, not very good for my audience. And then I thought of a cunning plan of where I could just cram this in to something Pokemon related or Nintendo related. And Weavile was my answer. So there you go. If it seemed forced, it's 'cause it was. Sorry.